Good morning, St. Francis, and good morning, people of God. It is Monday, the 5th day of August 2024, Monday of the 18th week of the year, the 18th week in Ordinary Time. Back in Connecticut from New Jersey before I start making my way back down to Raleigh once again. Hopefully a hurricane by the name of Debbie, little Debbie, isn't going to bother me as I make this trip. I don't end up in a hotel someplace in Atlanta. But on this day, which is calm and peaceful and blue skies before rain begins to move up the coast, we are continuing again the great saga of Jeremiah. Here we have competing prophets. We have Hananiah and we have Jeremiah. Now, there is a Hananiah who gets thrown into a fiery furnace. This is not the Hananiah who does that. This is somebody else. That's a Hananiah from the exile in Babylon. But this is still in Israel, still in Jerusalem. And Hananiah wants to be a prophet very badly. And so because God, though, has not done anything to demonstrate or to make Hananiah a prophet, he basically decides to go off on his own and prophesize good things, because that's all people ever want to hear are good things. And like we've been hearing for the past couple of months, basically, most of the prophets have doom and gloom and woe to prophesize and to say to the people. Here, Hananiah, wanting to get into the good graces of the king of Jerusalem and want to tell Jerusalem that everything's going to be fine, everything's going to be fine, basically has this wonderful prophecy about God breaking the yoke of Babylon and destroying Nebuchadnezzar and bringing all the vessels back into the temple. That, again, there was an incursion into Jerusalem and the vessels from the temple were all taken and everything else like that. And everything's going to be made well again and everyone is going to be happy. And won't everybody like Hananiah the best because he was the best prophet? Well, then there's Jeremiah saying that Hananiah doesn't know what he's talking about, and Hananiah is an idiot, and that Hananiah is going to, that things are going to be worse because of what Hananiah is prophesying, and if people decide to listen to him. And so Hananiah basically tries to destroy Jeremiah because, again, Jeremiah is saying things that people don't want to listen to, although they are the truth. Again, this is where the truth hurts sometimes. And again, Israel in its own way and its own understanding of itself basically can't see any more than past its own nose, and that's the big problem for Israel, is that it's not recognizing the desperation and the jeopardy that it has placed itself in, because it has decided, that following whatever God wants them to follow is just not enough, and it isn't really helpful, to them and their ideas of earthly power and earthly influence and earthly wealth and whatever it is, and Hananiah trying to destroy Jerusalem, trying to destroy Jeremiah, God then speaks to Jeremiah and tells Hananiah, you're going to die because of what you did in rebellion against God. And so, again, the dissension and the division, even within Jerusalem, to wanting to listen to only that which seems good and well and happy and profitable to them, is, again, continuing to lead to their destruction. And that's always the most difficult thing, to listen to a prophet among us, because prophets bring challenge. They don't often bring comfort. They can bring comfort, and comfort will come from Jeremiah's mouth through God, or God speaking through Jeremiah's mouth, once the people of Israel are in exile. But before that can happen, Israel has to recognize the fact that it has gone down a path, perhaps from which there is no coming back. And again, those of us who kind of try to point out, challenge, are not often welcomed. Because challenge is something we don't want to deal with. Challenge is something we don't want to face. And yet sometimes it is the challenge, not because God wants to punish or God wants to hurt us or God wants to have us suffer. That is not God's design. Although, again, we tried to make this in the Middle Ages, a constant metaphor and a constant understanding for God that, suffering is good, suffering is great, just keep suffering and God is happy. That's not what God wants. But God wants us to wake up and realize, what it is that we are doing, to recognize our actions, to recognize all these things that we're doing that are not for our best interests, that are not good for us, and to stop doing them. Again, always waking up. That's what conversion is. It's a waking up and realizing, is this really what I want to be? Is this really where I want to go? Or can this change? And can I move away from this? Can I choose something else? There is always the chance to choose something else. And again in the Old Testament, the prophets, try to show Israel that there's another way to choose, but you have to want to make the choice to be able to see this new future and to see this security and this peace that you do desperately want, but are going down the wrong avenues to find it. In Matthew's Gospel, today we have Matthew's interpretation of the feeding of the 5,000. Again, we've had this 2 weeks ago with Mark. We are in the Bread of Life discourses within the Gospel within this season. at this time in the season, the year of Mark. We moved to the year of John. We moved to the Gospel of John now, and we have these Bread of Life discourses again. We try to spiritualize this all the time. Again, like your spirit needs to be fed. Your spirit, no, again, Jesus is not feeding spirits. He's feeding bodies. He's feeding bodies that are hungry, because this is where the gospel takes root, not in our spirit, but in the flesh that we live in. To live out what the gospel says needs to be lived out is something that has to be lived out in the state and in the mind in which we exist in time and in space, not in some spiritual ethos, somewhere in the heavens or whatever, wherever it is. We need to be fed by Christ. We need to be fed by God. And Jesus does that in feeding the 5,000. Having them wake up to the reality, again, of what this means, and of how, again, there is not a God who wants to basically make us follow rule after rule after rule, but wants to make sure that we're happy. Again, is the message, for today that we've been hearing these past couple of weeks, and we will continue to hear on Sundays from the Gospel of John. A bread of life is not just for life to come. It is life here and now, to be the people who understand how powerful it is to believe, to have faith, to be able to express a relationship with God in a relationship with each other. That is the true feeding in our lives. That is the true nurturing that gives us life. That is the true witness that we are called to give to the world. A blessed day, St. Francis and people of God. May the Lord give you his peace.